Hello, good morning. Here we are for the last but one chapter of Slaves for the Isabella. It would help if I was holding the right way out, wouldn't it? I don't know if you noticed that. So we've got the penultimate chapter now, and then shortly the final chapter, so that those of you who are still in school can get to the end before October half term, and any of you who want to listen over half term will be able to listen in. I'm sorry I'm a bit croaky. I think I've picked up my smallest son's filthy cold, so everybody's going to have a deep voice this morning. So you may struggle to distinguish between Lucy and her father. Anyway, we're on chapter 16. Joe has been back in his own time, where he was hauled back just at the moment that he was hearing Tobias and Jackson plotting to kidnap Amos and Florence and Rose and Billy and sell them back to the slave traders. And Joe got hauled back to his own time when Jackson and Tobias attacked him, and now he doesn't know. Months and months have gone by at home, and he's afraid that he's too late. He's too late to help. But suddenly, while he's sitting in the cinema waiting for the film that he's about to watch to start, he's hauled back into Lucy's time. Chapter 16. The next moment, he was standing in utter darkness. It felt like an enclosed space. Presumably, this was the half-built house where he'd been before, but he couldn't see anything. He listened. There was the scrabble of a rat, but no other sound except a snatch of drunken singing from far away. He felt his way across the room, arms and hands outstretched, sliding his feet over the floor. Nothing blocked his way. He could smell sawn timber and wood smoke carried on the night air. As his eyes grew accustomed to the dark, he made out the silhouette of the house next door through a gap in the wall. He turned round to peer at the room. Nothing had changed since last time he was here. He was puzzled. In the weeks that had gone by, there should surely have been windows and doors put in, perhaps plaster on the walls. But nothing? He crossed to the doorway and went out, through the room where he'd heard Jackson and Tobias talking. The dust on the floor had been disturbed, but that didn't tell him anything. Eventually, he found his way to the window he had climbed in through and scrambled out of it. It was brighter outside than indoors. The moon shone high in a silvery sky, casting sharp shadows on the ground. Joe pulled his coat close around him. It was too cold to be high summer. He tried to make out whether the leaves on the trees nearby were tinged with autumn, but he couldn't tell in the moonlight. He looked around without knowing what he was looking for. Nothing he could see had changed at all. A spark of hope leapt inside him. Was it possible that this was the same night as last time? He didn't dare believe it. It could easily be the next night, and still be too late. He walked down the track towards Park Street, his footsteps loud in the stillness. Beyond the house next door to John Pinney's was a narrow lane he hadn't noticed before. He was about to cross the top of the lane when he heard the stamp and whinny of a horse. On instinct, he shrank back into the shadows. The horse stood about halfway down the lane. It was hitched to a cart. A boy waited beside it, holding the reins. As Joe watched, two hooded figures emerged onto the lane from the building on the left. Joe wondered what was in there. Then he realised this must be how you got to the coach houses and stables of the houses on Park Street. He tried to work out how far down the hill Lucy lived. Was it possible that the two figures had come out of her father's coach house? He edged closer, keeping in the shadow cast by a high wall that ran down the right-hand side of the lane. There was something furtive about these men, assuming they were men. Each was carrying a bundle wrapped in sacking, the second larger than the first, though neither was apparently heavy. As they dumped them over the side of the cart, Joe thought he heard a whimper, but he was too far away to be sure. Already the two figures were pulling themselves up beside the boy who had hopped onto the driver's seat. The cart was coming towards Joe. He froze. What if the hooded figures were Tobias and Jackson? The smaller bundle could have been Billy and the larger one Rose. They hadn't struggled, but they might have been tied up inside the sacking. If that was true, Florence and Amos were probably in the cart already. He had the chance to save them after all, but not if Tobias caught him first. Joe's pulse was racing. He sidled as quickly as he dared back along the wall. He wished he hadn't crept so far down the lane. A loose stone skittered away beneath his boot. Joe waited for Tobias to shout, but there was no sound other than the hooves and wheels. He reached the end of the lane and scurried up Great George Street. He threw himself down in the shadow beside Pinny's house. The cart came out of the lane. Its wheels grated against the stones as it turned the corner away from Joe. As it came to the junction with Park Street, the boy cracked the whip. The horse lurched forward. It clattered away down the hill between the silent houses. Joe ran down the track after them. He was certain now that he'd just witnessed Tobias and Jackson kidnapping the children, and probably Amos and Florence as well. He should have stopped them. He should have tried to prevent the cart from setting off, except, of course, that the two men would have overpowered him easily. He'd have ended up bundled in with the others. By the time he reached Park Street, the cart was out of sight. Joe hesitated. Should he try to catch up? That way he would know where Tobias went. But he couldn't rescue 4 people alone. He couldn't even rescue the children on his own. He had to get help. He trotted down to Lucy's house and stood beneath her window. The shutters were closed on the inside. He picked up some pebbles from the road and threw one carefully up at the window. It fell short of the house. He threw another. There was a tiny sound as it grazed the window pane. He threw a third and a fourth, then a whole handful. He waited. "Come on, Lucy." Nothing happened. He picked up more stones and threw them all, careless now. "Come on, come on," he muttered through gritted teeth. The longer it took, the further away Tobias and Jackson would get, and the harder it would be to find them. Behind the glass, the shutters moved, the window opened, but it wasn't Lucy who looked out. "What is it?" Catherine hissed. Then, recognising Joe, "You shouldn't be here." "I need Lucy." "She's asleep." "She can't be." Joe's voice came out higher than usual. "She just called me." Catherine looked over her shoulder and shook her head. "She's fast asleep. Go away." She closed the window. Joe took a step back. How could Lucy be asleep? How had he got here if she hadn't been thinking of him? He looked down the empty street again. It was too bad. He had to rouse her. "Lucy!" he shouted. Now that Tobias and Jackson had gone, there was no need to be quiet any more. "Lucy!" He knew he would wake William and Ellen, and probably others too, but he'd need plenty of people awake if he was right about what had happened, and only Lucy would believe him enough to go and check. "Lucy!" Her window stayed shut, but the window below opened. William's head appeared in its nightcap. He leaned on the sill with both hands. "What is the meaning of all this noise?" he bellowed. "Sir," Joe called, "I was trying to wake Lucy. You need to check Amos's room and Florence and the children. They've been taken, I'm sure of it." Suddenly he wasn't sure. What if he had made a mistake and the 4 of them were all safely asleep? "What absolute nonsense," roared Lucy's father. "They're tucked up in their beds as all God-fearing folks should be." He glowered at Joe. "I told you to go. Now make yourself scarce." "Please, sir, I beg you, just make sure Amos is still in the house." "Did you not hear me? You're disturbing the entire neighbourhood. Do I have to send for the constable?" Below, the front door opened. Morley stood there in his dressing gown, his wig askew. In one hand he held a candlestick, in the other a long wooden staff. "You heard the master," he growled. "Now go." "Please," Joe pleaded. "I overheard Tobias and Jackson talking about selling Amos and the others onto the Isabella." "A likely story." Morley's face was rigid. "We know you're not to be trusted." He started down the steps, brandishing the stick. Joe backed away. Behind Morley, something pale moved. Lucy was in the doorway. "Please, Lucy," Joe cried, "run to Amos and Florence's rooms. I think they've been taken." Morley's stick was raised above his head now. "Happy now?" The butler's usual mask of civility was quite gone. "You've got what you wanted, and woken up half the street into the bargain." He advanced on Joe. "Let this be a lesson to you not to do such a thing again." He brought the stick down hard across Joe's shoulders. The blow sent a shockwave through Joe. He staggered and fell to his knees. Morley raised the stick again. Joe put his arms over his head. All he could think was, "Hold on, stay here. Don't let him beat you back into your own time." Morley cracked the stick a second time. Joe crumpled. There was a shout from above. "Stop, man! Stop!" Joe didn't dare look up. "The boy's right," William shouted. "They've gone, and so has Tobias. Send someone for the constable, quick. Tell him we'll meet him at the quay." Morley hurried into the house without a backward look. Joe knelt in the dirt beside the road, massaging his bruised flesh. Of all the people he might have expected to be beaten by, it would not have been Morley. He touched a tender spot and winced. At least the message had got through. He hauled himself up. A minute later, a boy came out of the servants' entrance and sprinted off down Park Street. For a good while, nobody else came out of the house. With the shutters closed at every window, there was no sign of light. Joe started to wonder where they were coming, after all. But at last William appeared with Peter and Morley, each of them carrying a lantern. A sword hung from William's waist. "What about Lucy?" Joe asked tentatively. "This is no time for women and children," William replied. But they hadn't yet reached College Green when they heard footsteps behind them. "Go home, child," William told his daughter without breaking his stride. "No, father." Lucy was breathless, but her jaw was set. "If I hadn't believed Joe and gone to look for you, you wouldn't know they'd gone. Sorry, if I hadn't believed Joe and gone to look, you wouldn't know they'd gone." She hurried along next to him. "Joe knew already what Tobias and Jackson were up to. He'd seen what they were doing to Amos. He tried to get Amos to tell you, but Amos said he was just a slave." Unease passed across William's face, but all he said was, "Very well, come if you must." They moved quickly and quietly along the edge of College Green. As they neared the quay, the gracious townhouses gave way to older dwellings, tumbled one on top of another. Joe heard a baby crying and a man shouting, but most people seemed to be asleep. A few moments later, however, Joe heard the sounds of hushed activity. The rattle of barrels rolled over cobbles, the hollow sound as they reached the gangplank, the squeaking of ropes being tightened, short, sharp shouts. Water slapped against wood and stone. The tide was high. With a clutch of his heart, Joe knew what that meant. Jackson and Tobias wanted to get Amos and Florence onto the Isabella. He seized Lucy's arm. "It's about to leave, isn't it?" Is he planning to have them transported back to the plantations? William sounded alarmed. He quickened his pace. "Constable!" He raised his arm. Ahead of them a figure detached itself from the outline of the ship. Joe gazed up. The Isabella was huge. In the moonlight her 3 masts seemed to soar high overhead with lines of rope suspended like vast spiders' webs. The ghostly bulk of sail was bunched along each spar, and in the rigging the silhouettes of a dozen boys stood out against the sky. In front of the ship 4 large rowing boats had been manoeuvred into position. Ropes were now flung out from the ship with cries of "Make fast!" 1 oarsman from each boat attached a rope, while the rest huddled on their benches waiting, rubbing their hands to keep warm as swirls of mist rose from the river. "Mr. Lucas, sir." The constable approached. "You've lost some runaway slaves, I hear." "Not runaways, Stanford." William was impatient. 4 negroes, a man and woman, and a girl and boy, taken from their beds as they slept. Constable Stanford's eyebrow flicked up. "What makes you think that? And why should they be down here and not on the road to London already?" William's impatience turned to irritation. "They've been kidnapped by my nephew." The constable's expression opened up into fascinated astonishment. "How do you know, sir?" "I heard him planning it." Joe interrupted. Please, there's no time to lose. Will the Isabella sail tonight?" "Within the half-hour, I'm told," Stanford said pompously. "Then we have to hurry," Joe cried. "They'll be on board the ship. They have to be." He began to move towards it. "Hold on, young man." The constable caught him by the shoulder. Joe gasped as the man gripped him just where Morley's stick had struck. "You can't just board a ship, especially not when it's about to sail. Unless you fancy visiting the West Indies, of course," he chortled. "I don't think you appreciate how serious the situation is," William cut in. "My nephew is known to have been plotting with a former servant from my household. They hope to sell the negroes for their own gain." "A former servant, you say?" Constable Stanford clicked his tongue. "Well now, that can't be allowed. Theft of the master's property." William grimaced, but Joe wanted to shake the constable. What did it matter who planned the thing? There were people's lives at stake. If they didn't get a move on, it would be too late. "All the same, we can't just march on board," Stanford said. "We'll need to notify the harbour master and the water bailiff, and the law may require you to get a writ of habeas corpus." "Then the law's an ass," William declared. "If we don't rescue these people now, they'll be gone, and that will be that." He pushed past Stanford and strode along the quay towards the gangplank of the Isabella, just as a figure hurried off the ship. "Look where you're going, please, sir," William admonished him. Then he saw the man's face beneath his hood. "Well, well, if it isn't John Jackson." He caught the footman by the arm before he could slide away. "Would you like to explain what you're doing getting off the Isabella at this hour?" Jackson cringed. "I was on my way to your house, Mr. Lucas, sir. I was coming to tell you that your slaves have been taken. That boy who claimed to be your nephew from France, he kidnapped them. Revenge for you sending him away. Not that you weren't right to do so, Mr. Lucas, sir." William glanced at Joe. Then he said to Jackson, "That's kind of you, indeed. Though it doesn't explain how you know about it, nor why you're here. Never mind. As you're so anxious to see the culprit brought to justice, you'll be pleased that he's with me." He gestured to Joe. "We've just been speaking to Constable Stanford, together, in fact." Jackson looked at Joe. The colour drained from his face. He wrenched his arm free of William's grasp and scurried away, his cloak flapping behind him. William turned to Joe. "That wasn't quite the reaction I expected," he said, perplexed. Still, there's no time to talk about it now. At least we know that Amos and the others are on the ship. We just have to find them before it leaves. He marched up the gangplank, with everyone else close behind. "This ship's about to set sail," shouted a sailor from the deck. "Stay on the quay if you don't want to go with her." "I'll take my chance," William shouted back. He turned to the others. "I'm going to find Captain Roper. I'll wager he knows something about this. In the meantime, Morley, you go down and search the main deck. The rest of you search the lower deck." He set off towards the stern of the ship. Morley looked around for a moment, then followed a sailor down through a hatch in the deck. Peter went after him. Joe and Lucy looked at each other. There was so much Joe wanted to say, but he knew it would have to wait. "I've missed you," he mumbled, and then blushed furiously. Lucy smiled. "It's only been a few hours. I know it was an awful scene earlier this evening, and I'm sorry I couldn't stop my father sending you away. But I was going to try again to persuade him tomorrow. I hoped you wouldn't have gone far." Joe's held up his healed hand. "I've been gone altogether," he said, "for weeks." She stared. "You really have? Goodness." "I'll tell you about it later," he said, "but first we have to find Amos and Florence." He followed Morley and Peter down the ladder beneath the hatch. From above, he heard a series of shouts across the upper deck. Lucy looked round. "Oh no," she cried, "they're taking up the gangplank. They're raising the sails at the bow." She rushed away out of Joe's view. Orders were barked out all over the ship. She reappeared at the top of the ladder. "They've pushed off," she said desperately. "The rowing boats are towing us out. We're moving." So there we are. They're on their way to the West Indies by mistake. And can they find Amos and Florence and get them to safety before the ship's really out at sea? Well, I'm going to read the last chapter quite shortly. I'm just going to go off and have a quick little something to eat. I forgot to have anything to eat before I started this one today. So I'm actually rather peckish, it being 20 to 12. So I'm going to go and do that now. And then I'll be back to read the final chapter. I'm sorry it's a bit croaky. I do seem to be losing my words today. I misread rather a lot, didn't I? Never mind. I'm afraid that's what you get if you listen to me. It's more like a bedtime story than an audible book. Right. See you again soon for the end. Bye.